but we're talking about contracts, Jody.
Yes, we are.
Let's
Everybody, I
get
hope
right
you guys are
into the
ready.
soapbox.
Yes, Marco, Billy Berg, Jay Clean, GB. I hope you guys are ready. And everybody who's about to join us, here we go. Now, Ryan, the last X amount of days, the topic has been about contracts. And I've thought, and I've been on this side of the fence, I've been on that side of the fence. And I know you had to say, Jody, where do you stand on this? Well, let me ask you this question to you and everybody in the chat. Who does it actually benefit?
The athlete.
Right. Okay.
The athlete that's under contract has, until it doesn't, but at the moment, and I'm going to go somewhere with this.
Okay.
Just quickly. You have the situation where there is one dominant promotion in sport. You could argue that there's two, but they are partners. So King of the Table and East versus West are kind of in the same, they're cooperating. So this promotion or this contract is for those two. If I understand this correctly, it's for those two very dominant promotions.
Mm-hmm.
From all indications, these are lucrative contracts that are being offered to a select number of athletes.
Okay.
At the moment, extremely beneficial. What it might become is something different, because if you end up in a scenario where all of a sudden, let's take the high five. Let's take those guys for a minute.
Okay.
If they all of a sudden become a major dominant force in arm wrestling that has more to offer, and that's a long ways away, okay? The people that are locked into those exclusive contracts for whatever it is, 3-5 years, whatever it is, are going to wish they hadn't signed it. But that's what happened between PAL and WOL. So anyway, I'll get back to you for a second, and I will jump in periodically because I do have a lot of things to say about this.
Well, I'll tell you what, you're going to hear me use pro wrestling as an example, other organizations as an example. So for anybody that watched my tidbit yesterday about the contracts, will know where I'm going with this. So every promoter wants their guy. And we'll use this as an example as it sits right now. Devin and Gasparini. We all know whoever wins that match at the next East vs. West will be the guy. Okay. However, King of the Table and both underneath the Core Sports umbrella, are they not? Now,
it's not from what I understand, Core Sports is the stream or the organization that puts the pay-per-views on, but they are not the person or not the entity that has the contracts.
Okay. So, King of the Table, their guy's Levon. Okay. Now, sucky thing is that whoever wins between Devin and Ermis is still second fiddle because Levon had beaten both those guys. However, let's just say that Levon did not face those guys. Here's the deal. Here's where you start running into trouble. Let me fix my screen. Because number one, the buildup, it's a double-edged sword. The buildup will be awesome. Oh, what promotion is best guy? Who's going to win? And this goes back to this pro wrestling reference. Ryan, you and I are around the same age, give or take a couple years. And when we grew up, because you and I are big wrestling fans, that age-old question when we were younger, who's the man? Is it Hogan or is it Flair? Is it WWE or WWF at the time? Or is it NWA/WCW? We all want to know, right? You got the same scenario right here. Who is going to be the man? Now, if in fact that does happen when you got both guys from each organization as the number one top tier, it's awesome. Here's where the downfall happens. Somebody has to lose, right? And that promoter doesn't want their guy as being the loser, because now all of a sudden that takes some of the luster off of that. That's where you start having trouble. That's just one entity, right? What you don't want, as we all see this contract thing goes, this goes back to UAL, right? because I've been thinking about this a while. So as an athlete, like I asked you before, it benefits the athlete. Now, Ryan, you've had a contract before. I've had a contract before. It just so happens that COVID kind of wrecked all that. Now, with that being said, when anybody reaches out to you or an athlete for a contract, it's exciting because in your mind, you think, wow, man, this organization wants me to be a part of their group. And I'm thinking, cool, you feel good about yourself. All of a sudden now, hey, I signed this contract with, WAL or UAL, whatever the case may be, right? Now, all of a sudden, if I sign a contract, I'm going to be training my butt off, and you get this new energized because now I just got to keep training until I get the call. Now, problem is COVID did one good thing, I think. And this is where I'm going to start having people hate me, so I get it. So Wall was awesome when it first started. It was a tournament format. When it morphed into super matches, it was exciting because we never seen anything at that point. That was the original of what we're doing. I mean, Neil was the original super matches, but you see what I'm saying, right? Now, problem is, as Wall started to flourish year by year by year, we start getting the same people in the same matches over and over and over again. It started to lose some of its steam. But you and I will watch it because we're fans. And I think you don't want that same thing again where, hey, guess what? There's matches we want to see, but because of the contracts, we can't see them. That was the number one issue that we all had as fans. So the athlete is fine. The fans are what's upset about this whole contract thing. Now, once you're locked in, that's it. They tell you when to compete, when not to compete, and all that kind of stuff. And if you start to lose, they might quit calling you, but you're still in the contract. That sucks also because you're locked in. So basically, where I see it depends on the individual. You sign this contract, you got to know, hey, if I'm running and gunning, I'm whooping ass and stuff, I'll be getting a lot of frequent calls, getting, whatever paid for. But if I start to lose, then my phone does not ring off the hook as much as it did before. But you are still underneath that contract until that contract expires. Ryan, take over. Chat.
Yes, I would love to, because we cannot compare the mistakes of the past to the current state of the sport. So we have the WAL that had these weird restrictive contracts, and basically they sucked. They were awful contracts that had no guarantees in them. They were for a period of time where you basically signed yourself over to this organization. Now, I can't say they all sucked because I'm sure there's a few guys right at the top that had a very different scenario than most of us. But we got these contracts and we thought, that's special. It's something new. It's something exciting. We're going to get offered all these matches. Sometimes they came, sometimes they didn't. However, what I believe there's major differences here. There's not two major forces in arm wrestling right now. There's one. Let's face it. There's one at the moment. We also have heard that these contracts have guaranteed opportunities and money attached to them. So you have X amount of dollars per appearance and X amount of guaranteed appearances unless something happens where you're injured or something like that. Then the contract, I assume one of those matches would fall off because you've been given the offer with the agreed upon amount of time to prepare. And if you can't do it, you can't do it.
Right.
So now we have one major organization that's paying athletes its stability, its ability to plan throughout the year and get ready for events. And to your point of the same guys being recycled over and over again, they ran much smaller cards in WAL, and there was no set path to entry. In the East versus West, they have that. Those mechanisms are built in where you have the ability to go through a process that guarantees you at least an appearance on the East versus West card. Mm-hmm. So there are opportunities out there. Are they always a good thing? Not really, but I believe that Engen's being fair about this to the point where we have seen at least one athlete cancel all future appearances in other organizations just to sign this contract.
All right.
Now, that has to say something. The word lucrative has been put out there a couple of times. I don't know what that means from an arm wrestling perspective. Does it mean that somebody is all of a sudden going to be able to retire from their, their Monday to Friday and just be an arm wrestler? Maybe. And we also don't know how many people have been approached about this. It is a complete mystery at this point because I assume that, let's take Todd Hutchings. Yes, guys, we're talking about Todd Hutchings because that was made very public.
Yeah.
We don't know any of the details of his contract. He might not even be the first guy that's signed. And we don't know the back and forth. So let's, from a high level overview, they probably have a base contract. There's probably some other things built in that give you the ability. Even the World Arm Wrestling League had the ability for you to do things outside of the World Arm Wrestling League. You just needed permission.
Ooh, I like this comment. David said Ingen is also coordinating with Arm Wars and Monster Factory, which is good. Because I was going to bring up my next point. Once, East versus West or what have you, start locking in some of these top tier athletes, what does that do with the other organizations?
Well, we gotta talk about that because we're going to be talking about the AWC event a little later in the show. And we saw an event, and that's this weekend. We saw an event happen or get altered that is down the road a little bit, I believe in October. And that was Todd Hutchings going against, was it Lachlan?
It was Lachlan Adair for the international intercontinental title.
Yeah, well, hey, Travis, you outclassed the bum, says, did Wagner Bortolato sign a contract? That crossed my mind that maybe he's not injured and maybe he signed a contract. That being said, we don't know that for sure. So let's assume that what we have been told is accurate. Now, the AWC event's still going off. You've got Todd Hutchings there. You've got John Berzink. You've got Matt Mask. So those are some pretty big names that are probably going to get offered. At least a couple of them are going to get offered contracts in East versus West. That being considered, why is Todd Hutchings able to compete at that one and not the AWE one?
And maybe there's this thing called a clause in the contract where, hey, I'm pulling John Berzink. I'm not pulling some Joe Schmo. I'm pulling John Berzink. And let's be real, everybody wants to see that. And here's the thing, Ryan, did you know originally when we left the air last Tuesday, today's topic was going to be the upcoming event? And then some way, somehow, here comes the monkey wrench, boom, contracts. And that's like the hottest thing there. Everyone's talking about. Even Captain America himself, Paul Lim, got on there this morning and had a video that we saw.
Oh, yeah, we know that Paul's going to sign a contract. We know that. We know there's two athletes confirmed.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Sorry, Jody, where are you going with that?
No, I was going to the fact that, it's always interesting to me because, again, if it benefits the person, right, fine. Because, again, you're talking about, like, for example, and I'll be the first, I'll tell anybody, right? I went to Arm Wars earlier this year, right? Everything got paid out of my pocket. That was me paying for that. I went to Monster Factory earlier this year, back in the spring, paid out of pocket. So it's not like I got a contract. It's not like, I was on like the main card and got paid or whatever, all that kind of stuff. That was out of my own pocket. Whereas you look at Paul Lim, who's going to go ahead and sign this contract. Well, anybody going to East versus West, as far as I know, is being taken care of from a financial standpoint. Now, is it something you can live off of? Probably not. But I guarantee you what Devin gets and what John gets is a little bit different than what, say, maybe Chance got or Paul Lynn got. I'm speculating, by the way. So
to add to that, well, Jay Clean, first of all, says, I feel for Lachlan. I like him. Don't feel bad for Lachlan. I bet Lachlan's getting a contract, and they would rather have that match at East versus West. So don't feel too bad for him. There's speculation, though, and this is what I was going with this, is that maybe it's Ingen's, like he clearly hates Bowen, like at the moment at least. So maybe there's there's an absolute you cannot do the AWE event.
Well, did you see Ryan's show the other day? Was it yesterday? Yeah. So he had a replacement for Lachlan. It was Dave Chafee next year.
Yeah.
So, and I don't know. I mean, as far as I know, I thought Dave was going to take time off after his next match coming up was who's he pulling? Sonov?
Yeah, he's pulling him at the High Five event.
Right. From what I heard, if I'm not mistaken, I could be wrong. I thought after that match he was just going to sit back, see what things, because Dave's been struggling lately with his health and all that kind of stuff, which adds to why he has his losing streak. So he said he was just going to finish that because he already had, hey, I agreed to do this match. I'm gonna fulfill my situation there, and then he was going to take time off and see what's going on. Now Ryan did say this will be in 2024, so he may pull the High Five match and just say, I'm gonna take the rest of the year off, heal up, train, whatever, and then come back.
Well, Dave has pulled a lot at East versus West. I bet he at least gets offered a contract.
And king of the table.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's all pretty interesting stuff, but there's an upside to all of this. If you're in the taking that stance that this is a super negative thing, you shouldn't have exclusive contracts. Consider the opportunities that could be out there for the second and third tier guys that aren't getting the calls from East versus West. Now you have all these promoters that are, might be calling those guys up and building those characters in their organizations.
There you go. That's what it's all about.
Now you can say, like, the biggest gripe about the whole contract thing was it prevented competition. It prevented guys from going against each other. At certain times in certain places, you were never going to see a Dennis versus Devin match. At one point, I believe Devin actually worked it into his contract with WAL that he could pull Dennis. That was the one stipulation I think he added in there himself, if that opportunity. And they did, but of course, we know the story. Dennis refused a right arm match, and they had to pull left.
Right.
But there was a big thing where you had the best of WAL and the best of PAL, and they couldn't touch each other. And I get that. From a promotion perspective, I get that. But I also think that you see these scenarios where these guys build their name in other organizations, and then they're brought over eventually to the bigger organization. It happens in UFC all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And then we find out who really was the best, but it takes some time. But the story gets better as time goes on. We have this problem in North America where we want everything right now.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that's the best thing for building the sport or the mystery or the intrigue around a match. Sometimes a slow burn is what it takes. And I don't necessarily mind being made to wait a little bit, especially if the two people keep being dominant in their respective organizations. Because if you would have had a match between Michael Todd and Levon, immediately when they were both being talked about being the best in their organization, well, then it's over. And one organization is crushed because, they're second tier.
Yeah, but it's not a bad thing, though, just because, somebody has to lose. We put so much stock in these one-on-one sports. It doesn't mean you're horrible, and especially this sport, because I'll tell you right now, we've all taken a loss. We've all taken an ass whooping at one time or another. And we've all given out some ass whoopings at one time or another. And I think so many people get so hooked up on that it's like going, if you happen to lose, it doesn't mean you're horrible, right? You lost, you dust yourself off and get back up on the horse. Now, there's going to be times you have taken losing streaks. Matt Mass taking losing streaks, or Derek Smith taking losing streaks. That's going to happen. It does not mean that these guys are horrible pullers. They just ran into a buzzsaw, okay, back to the lab, drawing board. I got to fix my flaws. Everyone does that, But what I don't understand, and this is where you had say the second tier. You got the top tier. I'm sure their contracts are going to be this. The next tier down, their contracts are going to be that, right? So here's my thing. with this going forward, what does that do with the we just had the East versus West qualifiers? What does that do to those? What does that do to those people? Because we still got guys like Grundy. Brad Grundy's going to participate. He won East versus West finals. Sarah McKinney, she won. She's going to be probably at not if not the 10th edition, maybe 11th or whatnot. So you got to sit there and wonder, does that hinder that? Because now if you win, you get a contract, and if you do, what's involved?
Well, I can answer that. It's not going to be everybody that pulls there. It's going to be under contract. It's going to be very similar to the old World Arm Wrestling League, where there are single match deals. Mm-hmm. And if you show up and you impress people, then you may work your way towards getting one of those contracts.
Right. Hey, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm a big fan of Jerome Loud, right? And I remember, I forgot what wall card it was, but he pulled on the undercard and won. But you never saw him on the main card, right? I think Dave Morocco pulled on the undercard, but you never saw him on the main card. So there's that, right? Now, like you said, Ryan, there's also situations where, as far as WL concerns, that, hey, you have a one-match contract, and you got to put everything out on the table. You got to pull for your life off, because if you impress people, you might get a call back. If you don't, okay, fine. Hey, I had fun doing it. I was a part of it at one time. Move forward. Now, you and I talked about this before. You were signed to a wall contract, and this is the bad part about COVID, because Ryan Espy had one match on wall, never seen again, right? Paul Lynn, Doug Erlach, guys who have been on the East versus West, had one match on WAL, never heard from again as far as that goes. And like I said, this is when COVID kicked in, right? Just shortly after that. So can you even discuss about what your contract entailed? Was it a one-match thing? Because I know you had a match scheduled, but then COVID kind of wiped that out, and it was like, okay, fine. And then it just all kind of did this, right?
Yeah. I can talk about it pretty openly. It was a pretty blanket contract. It was a period of time with the option for them to extend it. It was 2 years with the option for them to extend it by a year. And COVID hit, and I had a match scheduled at some point. I was offered a match on Magda's promotion at one point to pull Ron Bath, and that's right around that summer that we thought COVID was going away, and then it didn't. Right. WL said I could do it, but discouraged me from doing it at the time. But I never had a match on my contract. I never pulled for WAL after I signed a contract because of the pandemic. They just didn't have any more events.
Right.
Like, it just shut off. So we still don't know what they're doing. If they make a comeback at some point, I think they would have a pretty hard time. And if there's a rumor that they're coming back, well, I'm afraid most of their top guys will have signed contracts somewhere else by then.
Has that been a rumor for like 3 years now, though?
Yeah.
And like I said, and if they do, and maybe they might come back and say, hey, is it new and improved? I don't know. It depends on what you consider new and improved, because if all the elite guys are going over to King of the Table and East versus West, maybe this is the opportunity to say, hey, guess what? We, WAL, are going to cast some brand new, fresh faces for this league. Because again, multiple things that was positive that came out of COVID was that, hey, look how many organizations are going now, right? Armors rebooted itself, whether it be Iron House, Reality Check, it rebooted itself. Now you got Dark Card, Arm Gods was born, Monster Factory was born, East vs. West, King of the Table were born. Now you got Magda's, league going on. High Five got something going on. Bowen has something going on down in Australia. So honestly, it's just producing a lot more stuff. Now it opens doors for any kind of people. You don't have to be that elite, because for so long it was like, if you're elite or you like everybody else, right? And now with all these organizations, a lot more people like myself, the lunchbox guy who clocks in, clocks out, right, gets opportunities to be on these bigger stage just to show what you got. You know what I mean? And so I like that. We didn't have that 3-4 years ago. Now we do. We're good, right?
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, to put this thing to rest, as far as the soapbox goes, what do you want to close on? Because I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing that's happening. I like the fact that it's giving an opportunity to arm wrestlers that can potentially make a living off of the sport now, or at least supplement their income in a meaningful way.
Right.
I
wouldn't care.
wouldn't blame them. You know, if Engen put a contract in front of me that said you get, guaranteed 3 matches, that's all that it's expected out of you for the whole year of 2024. You show up ready to pull on these dates. We pay your flight, your hotel, your accommodations, and you get X amount of dollars. Where do I sign? Well, that's
as long as number one, as long as the athlete understands what does that entail, and number two, if you're okay with that, just know that, hey, I don't have to go to these other tournaments. I can help ref, don't get me wrong, but I ain't gotta go to these other tournaments no more. I can just focus on that one, right? Let's just say we're going to North versus South in Manitoba, for example. I don't care if Billy Berg or the powers that be says, hey, Jody, we'll take care of your flight, hotel. I'm okay with that. I mean, if I win, we're going to give you $100 if you win. I'm fine with that. This is just me, though. I'm not one of those guys that's like, I never had a bite of the apple, per se. I've never had a piece of the pie, per se, meaning that, how many times have you heard this, Ryan? Well, I would go, but it doesn't pay for my flight and yada, 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 yada. And I got to miss work. Therefore, it has to pay me for the day's work, of money. I'm not like that. No, I'm not like that.
Yeah. So there's a comment here. I'm going to highlight it. This is the different side of the sport. So this is your option. You can always get fame and name in WAF or IFA. You will have a harder time getting fame and name in those organizations on the amateur side of the sport. Is it the more honorable and probably, in some cases, a way harder event to win? I think so. I love going to the World Championships. However, it's thousands of dollars to attend a World Championship. It's thousands of dollars unless it's in my province to go to a World Championship. If it was in Vancouver, BC, Canada, it would cost me thousands of dollars.
Damn,
this
really?
is the alternative. Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, then I count myself very fortunate when the IFA Worlds came to United States in 2021. I was very fortunate because we all know originally it was supposed to be 2020, but COVID kind of wiped that out. So they just postponed it and says, hey, we're still going to have it in Orlando, Florida, in the United States that year. Now, it's gotten bigger since then because now you got more countries involved. But yeah, I was very fortunate, and it was a 2 for 2. What I mean by that is that, hey, I went to Worlds that year, did pretty well, second in the Masters. But we also made a family vacation out of it also. So once my 2 days of competing was done, I was on vacation mode. So that was a 2 for 2 deal. There you go. So
yeah. So I cannot fault any North American athlete for agreeing to sign one of these contracts. I can't. It's and you're from a vacation perspective, Jody, you're getting flown into the middle of Europe, and you can pretty much go wherever you want at that point.
Yeah.
So
it's like I said, and I'll use your scenario because when you said that, I was listening. I'm also thinking, for example, if I was an opportunity where, hey, we're going to have you 2024, you're going to have 3 matches. Tell me the dates. because then I can go ahead and talk to my boss, say, hey, I need this day off, this weekend, that weekend, whatever. I'm flying to Turkey. I ain't got to do a goddamn thing the rest of the year. I'm already booked and taken care of. Hey, can you come to my tournament? Sorry, I can't do that. If I wanted to, maybe, but it all depends on what the contract reads. Now, I may go to another tournament to watch, ref, help out, that kind of stuff, but I would compete because I know if I got 3 matches, especially on that big stage, you're going to need time to recover. You're going to need time to just, get your bearings going and focus on that. So, yeah, there you go.
I will say one thing just to close this out.
Yeah.
Engen made the comment, and I laughed at it a little bit as I was watching, because he says, I am not a businessman. Well, buddy, yes, you are. You are now. Whether you want to be or not, you are now a businessman.